12 months in Afghanistan had hardened me, shaped me, stripped me down to the raw core of who I was. And through it all, one picture had kept me sane. Jason's smile. My fiancé waiting for me. Our wedding, just a week away. I drove straight from the base drop-off in a borrowed rental, still in fatigues, my heart pounding with anticipation. I didn't call ahead. I wanted it to be a surprise, the kind of cinematic reunion people post on YouTube, the soldier running into the arms of the person they love, the tears, the laughter, the homecoming. I could already hear him laugh, that low, easy sound that once made me believe in forever. But when I opened the door to his downtown condo, the scene wasn't anything like the one I'd replayed in my head overseas. Jason stood in the living room, shirt half-buttoned, his hair mussed, and a woman, someone I had never seen before, was draped across his chest. She had smeared crimson lipstick, and the evidence was all over his neck like a neon sign announcing betrayal. My duffel dropped with a thud that echoed across the polished hardwood floor. For one long moment, nobody moved. The woman giggled nervously, tugging at Jason's collar, as if I were an inconvenience rather than the woman he was supposed to marry. Jason's eyes widened, but there was no shame in them. Just irritation, like I had caught him in the middle of something mildly inconvenient. "Emily, it's not what you think," he blurted out, fumbling with his shirt buttons. "Not what I think." My heart was still thundering from months of combat patrols, and yet here it was, the deepest wound, inflicted not by bullets, but by the man I thought I'd spend my life with. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the ring in his face, to let every ounce of fury pour out of me. But the army had taught me something important. Control. On the battlefield, losing your head could cost lives. Here, losing it would only give Jason the satisfaction of watching me shatter. So I swallowed the lump in my throat, straightened my shoulders, and looked at him with the same calm stare I used when briefing soldiers before a mission. "I'll shower," I said quietly, forcing my voice to stay even. "We'll talk tomorrow." The other woman smirked like she'd won something. Jason started to speak, but I brushed past them without flinching, rolling my bag down the hall to the guest room. Behind the closed door, I sank onto the bed and let the silence consume me. My hands trembled, not from fear but from a realization more powerful than rage. Jason had no idea what I was capable of. He thought betrayal made me weak. But in truth, it had just handed me my next mission. And this time, the battlefield wasn't in Kabul or Kandahar. It was right here, in San Francisco, with Jason Miller as my unsuspecting target. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't curse. I didn't beg. I stared at the ceiling and began to plan. Because if there was one thing war had taught me, it was this. Never let the enemy see you bleed. I didn't sleep that first night home. Not because of jet lag, not because of the hum of the city outside Jason's condo windows, but because my mind replayed the moment over and over. The lipstick stain, the smirk on her face, Jason's casual excuse. I lay stiff in the guest room bed, my fingers curled tight around the dog tags that had hung against my heart every day in Afghanistan. Those tags had been my lifeline in combat, proof that I was more than just a body in uniform. And yet, here in my own country, in my supposed home, I felt invisible, disposable. Morning came, and with it the performance. I showered, dressed in jeans and a soft sweater instead of fatigues, and walked into the kitchen as if nothing had happened. Jason was at the counter making coffee, pretending to scroll emails. The woman was gone. The silence between us was thick, but I forced a smile. "Morning," I said evenly, pouring myself water. Jason glanced up, relief flashing across his face. He thought I had forgiven him already. Thought my silence was surrender. That alone told me everything I needed to know. Jason was used to people letting him off the hook. Clients who overlooked his arrogance because he found them dream houses, friends who laughed at his crude jokes, women who probably came and went without demanding more than his half-hearted attention. He thought I would be the same. But Afghanistan had taught me patience. Strategy. I didn't need to explode. I needed to wait. To plan. That day, I wandered the city like a ghost, reacquainting myself with America. Cafes filled with students hunched over laptops, couples jogging along the Embarcadero, boutiques selling shoes worth more than a soldier's paycheck. I should have felt joy. I was free. I had survived. Instead, I felt rage simmering beneath my skin. All those months in the desert, guarding convoys, dodging IEDs, losing friends to ambushes, I had clung to the image of Jason, to the promise of a future together. And what had he done with that gift? Spent it on another woman. By evening, I knew what I had to do. Not scream. Not beg. Not walk away quietly. No, I would make Jason face the kind of accountability he had never known in his comfortable California life. That's when I called my brother, Mark. Mark was 3 years younger than me, still in grad school, restless and searching for purpose. He answered on the second ring, his voice warm but cautious. "Em, you back already? How was? I need you." I cut in. My tone must have told him everything. We met that night at a diner in Daly City, the kind with cracked leather booths and coffee that tasted like burnt hope. I told him everything, Jason's betrayal, my silence, my plan. At first, Mark's eyes widened in disbelief. That's insane. You're talking about. I'm talking about justice. I snapped, louder than I intended. I lowered my voice, leaning in. He took a year of my life for granted. He thought he could throw me away, but he doesn't know who he's dealing with. Mark studied me for a long time, then nodded slowly. So, what do you need from me? That was the thing about brothers. They didn't need all the details to stand with you. Jason's passport had been left on the nightstand, a careless oversight. Mark looked enough like him, same height, same build, same square jaw. Not twins, but similar enough that with a clean shave and the right paperwork, he could pass for Jason in the blurred eyes of bureaucracy. The plan was dangerous, audacious, maybe even reckless. But after surviving combat zones, I wasn't afraid of systems. I knew how easy it was to manipulate them if you understood their blind spots. So, a week before what should have been my wedding, Mark walked into a military processing office with Jason's passport tucked into his jacket pocket. He filled out forms with shaky hands, signed Jason's name in deliberate strokes, and let the machinery of enlistment swallow him whole. Meanwhile, I rehearsed my smiles for Jason, my I love yous, my wedding planning chatter. He bought it all. And each night, alone in the guest room, I stared at the ceiling and thought, you broke me in the most personal way, Jason. Now I'm breaking the one thing you care about most, your freedom. Because in America, a man could cheat and walk away unscathed. But in my America, the one shaped by sand, sacrifice, and service, betrayal had consequences. And Jason Miller was about to learn that the hard way. By the second morning, I had perfected the expression people expected from a bride, soft around the eyes, a little dazzled, like the world had finally arranged itself in my favor. On Instagram, I posted a sunlit photo of the ring against a cappuccino foam heart and wrote, 1 week. Jason reposted it with 3 fire emojis and a flexed bicep, which somehow summed him up better than any biography could. He loved optics. He worshipped momentum. The only thing he feared was a halt. So, I never gave him one. I kept us moving. We toured the venue again, a brick and burnished wood loft in Soma with string lights zigzagging between old steel beams and a dock door that opened onto a sliver of skyline. The coordinator, a tidy woman with a pixie cut, walked us through the run of show. First dance, toast, cake, a late-night taco bar Jason insisted on because it photographs playful. I nodded at all the right times and held his hand when he squeezed mine. The coordinator complimented our chemistry, and Jason's smile went confident and public. He was good at that smile. It never reached his eyes. Between appointments, I excused myself to the hallway, where I pretended to confirm a florist delivery. Instead, I texted Mark. How did the physical go? A moment later. Vitals normal. Labs drawn. Doc barely looked up. I pictured it as he must have lived it. A fluorescent room with a paper-covered table, the antiseptic smell, a nurse who'd seen thousands of bodies like his and never once paused long enough to memorize a face. Processing lines reduce people into rectangles. Forms, IDs, signatures. A passport opens more doors than a conscience ever will. Next step is paperwork review, he added. They're faster than we thought. Good. I needed the clock to tick. I needed the machinery to keep humming its bland, relentless hum while Jason filmed video tours of craftsman bungalows and boasted at open houses about multiple offers in this market. That night, I made lemon chicken and set the table with the white plates his mother had sent. Jason poured Pinot and described a couple from Boston who wanted San Francisco character, without, the San Francisco price. He laughed like he'd cracked a joke instead of a person. I laughed too because he was studying my face the way he studied comps, looking for signs, angles, leverage. Venue said the final head count is due tomorrow. I said, spearing arugula. Should we add your coworker Trevor? He texted about a +1. Jason waved it off. If Trevor wants to come, he'll show up. He always does. Head count means food, Jason. He grinned. We'll have extra. You hate waste, but wedding waste is good waste. Signals abundance. He said signals the way other people said blessings. It was a theology. When he fell asleep on the couch with the game on mute, I padded to the hall mailbox and slid a stack of envelopes into my tote. Insurance notices, registry perks, and one official packet stamped with an eagle. I didn't open it in the hall. I took it to the guest room and shut the door softly. Inside, the language was dry. More numbers than nouns, and yet my breath hitched. The first confirmation. A signed number. Report by date. A polite congratulations addressed to Jason Miller. I ran a finger over his name and felt nothing like guilt. I felt order. Not the moral kind, the logistical kind. Actions and consequences finally in the same room. The next morning, I went running along Crissy Field at dawn. The air tasted like salt and fog. Gulls scribbled their lazy loops over the water, and the bridge blushed red in the early light. I passed couples with dogs, a yoga class unfurling on mats, a kid in a warrior's hoodie chasing his father's long shadow. I used to envy the ease of mornings like this. Now I filed them in my head as exhibits, evidence that the world can look gentle while something decisive is happening underneath. Back home, I found Jason in the bedroom mirror knotting a tie, lips pursed. Broker tour, he said. New listing on Pine. Staged within an inch of its life. You'll love it. Maybe I'll stop by after I see the seamstress, I said. Bring your mother, he said absent-mindedly, if she promises not to cry on the silk again. My mother had cried when I enlisted, cried when I deployed, cried when she watched the news, and cried again when I texted her my return date. But she had not cried at the condo the day I saw lipstick on her future son-in-law's throat, because I hadn't told her. She was better at love than secrecy. I needed secrecy. Do you ever think about after? I asked, sliding a gold stud into my ear. Not the wedding. The marriage. He adjusted his cuff. We'll be a power couple. People like power couples. People, I repeated, and he didn't hear the bite. At the seamstress, I stood on a platform while pins whispered around my hem. The mirror reflected a woman I half recognized, war-tested posture in a satin sheath. The seamstress tugged the fabric at my waist and murmured, You've got a soldier's core. Dresses like this behave better on muscles. She meant it as a compliment. I smiled, but my mouth felt borrowed. When I left, I didn't head to Pine Street. I met Mark in a cafe near the courthouse, where the barista spelled my name Emily on the cup and Mark grinned like we were kids again, goofing on mistakes. He slid a manila folder across the table. They gave me the preliminary clear. There's a report date. It's soon. How soon? I asked, though I already knew. I had counted the days backward from the wedding like beads. 4 days. He watched my face, then added, There's still time to pull a ripcord. Say you changed your mind. Return the passport. Confess, even. Confess what exactly? I stirred my coffee. That he took my heart hostage for a year and spent it on someone else? I'm not sending a man who loves me, I said quietly. I'm sending a man who counts on never being sent anywhere he didn't choose. I'm sending a man who thinks consequences are for other people. Mark looked down at his hands. I just don't want you to disappear into this. The longer a mission goes, the harder it is to remember where it ends. I reached for his wrist and squeezed. It ends the moment he looks at the paper and realizes the future he photographed is over. It ends when I can walk into a classroom in Palo Alto and not flinch when someone promises me forever. His head snapped up. You got it. Conditional admission, I said, and my voice almost broke on the relief of it. Deferred for deployment, but now that I'm back, it's real. I start in the fall. Behavior science. Decision making. Why people do the stupid things they do. He laughed softly. Case study sits in a glass loft in Soma. Case study is currently choosing cufflinks. Another packet arrived that afternoon, thicker this time. I tucked it under the spare towels in the guest bath, between a bottle of eucalyptus bubbles and a stack of face cloths Jason never touched. The irony made me smile. The things men looked past. That evening, we had our tasting with the caterer. I swirled a spoon through a vegan chocolate mousse while Jason debated whether the taco bar should be street or elevated. He said elevated 5 times in 2 minutes. I said both, and watched the caterer's eyes soften. The reasonable bride, the peacemaker, the woman who greased frictions into harmony. It is amazing how quickly strangers slot you into their most convenient story. On the way home, Jason took a call through the car speakers. Listen, he said, laughing, she's not like other military girls. She came back soft. It's perfect. Wedding's on. Vibes are immaculate. I stared at the red taillights ahead and counted my breaths to 4, the way I'd learned in the desert when the night pressed too close. Soft. A word men liked when it cost them nothing to say it. At home, I changed into sweats and folded laundry while Jason FaceTimed his mother about seating charts. We have to keep Aunt Carol away from Dad, he said, or she'll start on the Supreme Court again, and then it's all MSNBC and no dance floor. From the hallway, I caught his eye and pantomimed a throat cut if he mentioned my deployment in his toast. He winked. He loved performing my service when it made him look good. He did not love the parts where I told him what the desert smelled like after rain, or how quiet a convoy got right before the radio crackled. He tuned those out, as if I were listing calories. Before bed, I sat at the guest room desk with a legal pad and divided a page into 3 columns: logistics, narrative, exit. Under logistics, I wrote dates, locations, offices, the name of the processing clerk who signed and mark, the number on the top right of the latest letter, the deadline that mattered most. Under narrative, I drafted the lines I would say to Jason when the time came: calm, spare, factual. No metaphors. No swears. The truth, properly lit. Under exit, I wrote, box up uniform. Move to sublet in Palo Alto. Return his rings to the dish by the sink, where he keeps keys and guarantees he never reads. My phone buzzed. A DM from a woman whose profile I didn't recognize. All angles and filters. Hey, girl. Not my business, but Jason was at Rye last night with a brunette. Thought you should know before your big day. I stared at the message and felt exactly nothing. Not jealousy, not grief. Only an exhausted clarity, as if a light I had been holding steady through a storm could finally be set down. I typed back, thanks. I know. Then I blocked her, not out of rage, but to stop noise from interrupting signal. Mark texted a photo, an appointment card with Jason's name typed where he should have been. You okay? He wrote. I will be, I answered and put the phone face down. The next morning, Jason surprised me with peonies. Your favorite, he said, and I almost laughed because he was wrong. My favorite were dahlias, but peonies were on trend, and he loved a trend. He arranged them in a low-glass bowl and stepped back to admire the tableau. The bowl, the marble counter, the ring on my hand, the curated grace. He kissed my cheek and said, we make sense. I looked at our reflection in the microwave door and thought, we make a picture. 2 days before the report date, the final envelope arrived, clear, unequivocal, impossible to ignore. I held it a long time before I slid it into the pantry behind the quinoa Jason bought and never cooked. There is a moment in every operation when the plan ceases to be a plan and becomes an event. You can feel it click. Weight shifts. Air sharpens. The elevator doors slide open, and you step out into whatever you set in motion. That night, he kissed me with performative tenderness and said, "You're the best thing that ever happened to me." "I know," I said, and for the first time since I walked into his condo, I meant something completely different than he heard. When he fell asleep, I moved through the condo barefoot, gathering the artifacts of a life I knew I would not live: a bridal magazine dog-eared to honeymoon resorts, a candle in a scent called home, a guest book with calligraphed instructions. I placed each one in a box labeled donate. Someone else could use them. I had other uses for space. At 2 a.m., I sat at the kitchen counter with a glass of water and practiced the lines in the narrative column one last time, out loud, to no one. My voice didn't shake. It had miles of desert under it and a bridge of red steel over it, and the weight of an oath somewhere in the center. In 4 words, he had misnamed me. In 100, I would rename him to himself. Mourning would be for truth. Then logistics. Then exit. And then, if the world still believed in sequence, something like peace. The morning after I boxed up the last traces of a life I no longer intended to live, I woke before dawn. Old habits. In Afghanistan, sleep came in fragments. A soldier's body learned to expect interruption. Even in San Francisco, with fog seeping through half-drawn curtains, my nerves jolted awake before the sun. I padded barefoot across Jason's polished floors and brewed coffee strong enough to burn. The apartment was silent except for the drip of the machine. Jason had left his phone on the counter, face up, screen dark. I stared at it for a long time, thinking how much of my war had been fought for people scrolling endless feeds without a clue of what it cost. He lived in that world, insulated, glossy. But today, reality was beginning to knock. I retrieved the envelope from behind the quinoa. Thick, official, heavy with consequence. My name wasn't on it, but my fingerprints were everywhere. I slid it into my tote and took it to the balcony. The bay was still gray, Alcatraz just a lump in the fog, the bridge lit like a spine. I opened the letter carefully, reading every line until I could recite it without glancing down. Report date. Assignment. Penalties for noncompliance. It was ironclad. Jason's future was already written in ink. When he finally stirred, he came out in boxers, rubbing his eyes, grinning as if we'd shared some sweet secret instead of a long deception. "Morning, soldier," he said, voice thick with sleep. I poured him coffee, smiled faintly. "Morning." He didn't notice the pause, the calculation behind it. He never did. That afternoon, we met my mother at the venue to finalize seating. She carried a notebook full of crossouts, determined to avoid awkward reunions. Jason scrolled his phone the whole time, tossing in half-hearted comments like, "Put the fun cousins together." I watched him, really watched him. How he shifted when anyone required patience. How shallow his listening ran. My mother noticed too, I think, but said nothing. She wanted me happy. When she left, Jason wrapped an arm around me in the parking lot. "She's a handful, huh?" I shrugged. "She loves me. That's not a handful." He chuckled, kissed my temple, already moving on in his head to some listing he had to show. Mark called that night. His voice was tense. They confirmed. Deployment order logged." "Good," I said, steady. "Good? Emily, this is federal. He could face charges if he refuses." "Yes," I finished. "That's the point. You're sure this is justice? Not just vengeance." I closed my eyes, leaning back against the guest room wall. "Do you remember Corporal Hayes? How he used to joke about going home to a wife who was probably redecorating the house without him?" "Yeah," Mark said quietly. "He didn't go home, Mark. He never made it back. And here Jason was, with everything waiting for him, and he threw it away. If Hayes could give his life, Jason can give a year.
He won't die.
He'll just learn." Mark sighed, torn, but he didn't argue further. That was enough. 2 days later, another letter arrived. This one required acknowledgement. A signature. Jason's. I sat with it in my lap, listening to him shower. The steam seeped under the door, carrying the scent of his aftershave. My pulse pounded in my ears. It was time to step out of shadows. That evening, I cooked pasta, poured wine, laughed at his story about a buyer who wanted a mid-century soul in a brand new condo. Then I set the envelope on the table between us. He blinked. "What's this?" "Read it." He tore it open carelessly, scanning. Then again slower. His face drained of color. "What the? Deployment? To Afghanistan? This isn't mine." "Yes, it is," I said softly. He shoved the letter back at me. "No. I never. This has to be a mistake." "It's not a mistake. It's your name, your passport, your signature." His eyes snapped to mine. "Emily, what did you do?" For the first time since I'd come home, I let the steel in my voice show. "I gave you the chance to serve, to understand, to face something bigger than yourself." He pushed back from the table, knocking his chair against the wall. "This is insane. I'll call them." "You won't," I interrupted. "Because if you deny it, they'll investigate. And then they'll find the documents, the signature, the ID trail. You'll face fraud, federal charges. Do you really want that?" His mouth opened, closed. Panic flickered behind his bravado. Jason Miller, the man who thought charm could bulldoze every obstacle, was finally cornered. "You set me up," he whispered. I held his gaze, calm and unflinching. "No, Jason. You set yourself up when you betrayed me. All I did was finish the paperwork." That night, he didn't sleep. He paced the condo, muttering about lawyers, loopholes, excuses. I lay in the guest room, eyes on the ceiling, listening. Not once did he ask why. Not once did he say he was sorry. In the morning, he looked wrecked. Unshaven, eyes bloodshot, hands trembling as he buttoned his shirt wrong. I almost pitied him. Almost. But pity was for innocence. Jason was guilty. And justice, my kind of justice, was finally in motion. Jason tried everything in the following days, frantic calls, half-baked excuses, even begging me to fix what I had started. But the system didn't care about his charm, his listings, or his smile. The date stood firm, printed in black ink. I gave him one last choice: board that plane or face the charges. Either way, your old life is gone. When he realized I wasn't bluffing, his shoulders sagged. Jason Miller, the man who once thought he was untouchable, was finally checkmated. A week later, as his future unraveled in front of him, I packed my uniform into a box and carried my duffel out for the last time. My service was done. His was only beginning. By fall, I was in Stanford, walking beneath red-tiled rooftops with a backpack instead of a rifle.
Free. Whole.
Ready to build something real.
And Jason?
He finally learned what it meant to serve.